Welcome everyone to Rings of Power Season 2, Episode 5 review. Considering that this show is pretty much just Amazon's fiction at this point, with very little traces of Tolkien, this episode was actually not unwatchable, but it did have some WTF moments which we're gonna discuss. We do these reviews every week, so if you enjoy them, please subscribe because each sub donates $1 to Sauron for a better wig. Apprenticeship at Celebrimbor doesn't pay well, so the Dark Lord is relying on us. But now, let's dive in. This episode starts with the Dwarven Rings of Power that are finally finished. You guys already know how I feel about the aesthetics of this show's rings, so I won't dwell on this for too long, but I do think it would be so much more impactful if the rings looked inconspicuous and ordinary. I don't think they have to look plain, but that was kind of the beauty of the One Ring in Lord of the Rings, right? It was just such an ordinary object with so much power. These rings could be more ring-looking rather than prop-looking, and it would be so much more intriguing. I don't know why they need this CGI glow and these bulky gemstones, but these are just my 2 cents. The way this ring works for King Durin is it tells him where the dwarves need to dig to get some light in, which they lost in the last episode after the earthquake. Durin and especially Disa are concerned with his newfound insight and obsessiveness, but for now things seem to work well. So they bring the light back to Khazad-dum, and this scene was really nice to look at. The Khazad-dum score for this show is, for me, the most iconic one, along with the Numenor theme. The music is one of the few highlights of the show. Next, we see Eregion. The dwarves and elves are celebrating the forging of the rings and their collaboration. And not a single episode of this season can go by without member berries, though in this case, it's justified. Here we are reminded of the doors of Durin that we saw first in Lord of the Rings. The doors were indeed built by Celebrimbor and the dwarf Narvi, so this part is fine, it absolutely belongs here. But for some reason the doors in the Rings of Power are depicted as a stone block brought to Eregion and unveiled there. I'm pretty sure the doors were supposed to be carved into the rocks of Khazad-dum, into the stone walls themselves. I don't think it's meant to be a standalone stone slab that was later transported and installed at Khazad-dum. But to all my book nerds out there, do let me know your thoughts on this. I may well be wrong. Celebrimbor and Sauron discuss making the 9 rings for men. Celebrimbor doesn't want to make them because men are easily corrupted. He sees through Sauron enough to know that he's sowing the seeds in Celebrimbor's mind and convincing him that they are his own ideas. But despite Celebrimbor being perceptive enough to notice this, he never truly doubts Sauron's intentions. And yeah, we can ascribe this to Sauron being the master manipulator and using some kind of magic to deceive Celebrimbor, but if he is doing that, wouldn't it make more sense if Celebrimbor were fully on board and oblivious to the deceit? Is Sauron's magic and manipulation only half effective? At least if Celebrimbor were completely under Sauron's influence, we could say that he's driven by pure ambition and desire to prove his worth, unable to see anything else. But if Celebrimbor is only partly deceived, he comes across as an even greater fool, who has suspicions and reservations, but willingly chooses to ignore them for plot convenience. In Numenor, Pharazôn is now king, because the people decided that the eagle chose him. Even though we all know that's a lie, the eagle just came in to chill and remained as neutral as Switzerland. He picked no side. It was the side that picked the eagle. But anyway, Pharazôn tasks Kemen with something we'll get to in a moment, and Eregion is a total villain in this season. She's a completely different character from season 1, without any proper build-up to this point. Eregion, unlike her father, is loyal to Pharazôn and not Miriel. I can definitely understand what they were aiming for here, I just think it wasn't well executed. She's angry at Miriel because she thinks she's responsible for Izzy's death and she doesn't trust elves. But there is this ridiculous villainous undertone to how Eregion delivers all her lines this season. If she were wearing a ring of power now, that would be understandable. But this feels like a complete 180. I mean, just look at this picture. It's like the high school mean girl and her posse, consisting of only her boyfriend, but you get the point. And we get another gem of a line, almost as good as "the sea is always right." Eregion has a little fight and disagreement with her father about the current ruler of Numenor, and she warns him by saying, "You are walking a treacherous path." His response? "And yours is made of seawater." Ignoring the fact that this makes zero sense unless she's Jesus and is walking on water, even though that still wouldn't make sense either, but also, if the sea is always right, as the Numenoreans say, shouldn't the phrase, "you're walking on a path made of seawater," imply that she's walking on the right path? The path of the sea, aka the correct path? Well, we all know they just wanted a sea reference because Numenor. Honestly, a better, though equally dumb sounding response would be something like, "You're walking on a path strewn with seashells. Be careful not to cut your feet," or something like that. If they really wanted that sea reference, that would make slightly more sense. But the main issue here is the fact that the division in Numenor is growing. The split between the King's Men and the faithful hasn't been sufficiently set up in the show, I would say. So I think most casual fans will just think, well, it's like the election. We have Pharazôn's supporters versus Miriel's supporters, and they dislike each other. But the situation is a little bit more complex, if we dare open a book. We have the faithful on the one side, that would be Elendil and company, those who still worship the Valar, accept the friendship with the elves, and are on Miriel's side. And we have Pharazôn's followers on the other side, who are in favor of change, dislike the elves, mainly because they resent them for their immortality. And there's also a ban of the Valar, which is not discussed in the show from what I remember, but the ban prevented the Numenoreans from sailing too far west, the purpose of which was to stop them from longing for immortality of the undying lands. What happens in this episode is that the King's Men interrupt the prayers of the faithful, and it turns into a fight where the little weasel Kemen stabs Izzy's old friend in the back, literally. Elendil has now effectively lost 2 sons and a daughter too. Ouch. I do like that most of this episode, at least, is spent on highlighting the division between the Numenoreans. However, a lot of nuance is lost here, especially when we consider what the Rings of Power Season 1 did with that elf workers taking our jobs speech. Galadriel's arrival, one single elf's arrival, threw a portion of the Numenoreans into a full-blown panic, and they started to fear that now the elves will come and take over their island. In fact, the division, started centuries earlier, had nothing to do with Galadriel and was gradually splitting the Numenorean society into 2 factions. I get that they can't cover this fully in the Rings of Power. The timeline does need to be condensed somewhat when you're depicting this in a show, but the way the situation in Numenor was simplified is really not my favorite. I think the show did an okay job of showing why one side of Numenor has turned against Miriel, but I don't think the show truly justified the Numenoreans' hatred of elves. Back to Eregion. After a mini quarrel with Celebrimbor, Sauron decides to make 9 rings for men on his own. And apparently Celebrimbor is fine with this. He just lets him use his forge, his tools, and the assistance of his smiths. See what I said about Celebrimbor being only half deceived? If we say that Celebrimbor's main motivation for making these rings is ambition and thirst for recognition, then he would either jump right in when Sauron said he was going to proceed with the ring making, or at the very least, Celebrimbor would not let them do this alone, because if he's excluded from the process, others will get the fame and praise for the work. Prince Durin is suspicious of Sauron, aka Anatar, and of how the ring is affecting his father, so Celebrimbor questions Sauron if he did anything different to the dwarven rings. Sauron's reply? No, but we did. The explanation they give for why the 7 dwarven rings are corrupted but the 3 elven ones are not is because the 3 were approved by Gil-galad, but Celebrimbor lied to the High King when he proceeded to make the 7 and said they weren't making any more rings, therefore the 7 were forged with deception. That's how Anatar explains it to Celebrimbor, and it's not good, it's really not, but at least it's some sort of an explanation. However, This logic doesn't hold water because Celebrimbor decides that he didn't want to make more rings because men are easily corrupted. Now he will make more rings, because the only way to redeem himself for the corrupt dwarven rings is to either confess his sins to Gil-galad or to make more rings. How does this make sense? How does it solve Celebrimbor's major reservation? That men are weak, therefore we shouldn't give them these powerful rings. Plus, if you want to fix the issue with the 7, take the rings back maybe? Technically only King Durin is wearing his at the moment. Say that they need to be fine-tuned or something so that they'll work even better. Not many people know about them anyway, so this should be the reasonable answer if you learn that your product is faulty. Don't be like the pink sauce lady, Celebrimbor. And also, is Celebrimbor now gonna admit to Gil-galad that they're making more rings? Because if they don't, these will also be made in a deceitful way, therefore also corrupt, won't they? He speaks about how they will use different processes and new alloys and everything, but Sauron told you, the issue isn't the alloy, the issue is the deceit. And again, as weak of an explanation as this is, it's the explanation that the show decided to run with, so at least be consistent and play by your own rules, otherwise, why make them at all if nothing is gonna make sense anyway? Lastly, the cliffhanger for the next episode is Galadriel is now a prisoner of Adar, but he wants to collaborate with her. He wants her help. He wants her to be his ally. I mean, we saw that she has a thing for brunettes, so maybe this one will succeed where the other one failed. But yeah, these are my thoughts on this episode of The Rings of Power. Let me know yours in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and I will see you back on Friday or Saturday for episode 6 review. And remember,
the sea is always right!
The sea is always right!